Hello YouTube, hello viewers, and welcome back to another episode of creating our social media API using Laravel. As I say, in every single episode, we're kind of getting quite deep into the series. We've done quite a lot. I think we've gone past the point of the whole activation of the user. And in today's episode, we're going to look at getting out, well, before we log in, we need to check to see if that user has been activated. And if the user has been activated, then we can continue with our login flow that we currently had inside the system. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. So if you remember in our last episode, we managed to do this email verified at, and basically this is going to be our flag to see if our user has been verified. So they actually clicked on the email link and they've said, okay, this is my email. This helps with a lot of things, so you don't have a lot of spam. You could probably add some logic in to remove obsolete email addresses after so long. I mean, there's loads of things you can do with data to remove anything that's not valid. So we're going to check against this user, make sure that first of all, is he verified, and if he is, then we can continue with the login flow. Let's open up our project, and we're going to be working in our auth controller this time. So make sure that you have your auth controller open, because remember, this is where our login happens. We've obviously got the register and some other things that we've created, like me, and then obviously our new one, which is the activate email. But we want to make sure that before we log in, we can check to see if this user actually has activated their email. Otherwise, there's no point carrying on with any of the logic. Just saves us doing more calls and etc. I suppose just a little bit of extra security, I guess. Right, so if we have a look at Postman, and let's see what our login logic was here. We were passing in an email address, which is perfect, and a password. Technically, we're not going to be using the password. We're going to be using the email address, because we're going to check that first, and we're going to check if there's any entries, I guess, of that email address. And then second, if there is one, do we have a date in there? And if we do, we can just continue with the rest of our logic. So to do this, it's dead simple. Before we created this new user, so remember, this is our login. So we want to do our logic before this, and we're going to just do a check. We could just say check activated. We could call this. And that can be this. And this will also be targeting our user service, because obviously it's part of our user. And we'll just call it a new one to call check user is activated. If I can spell correctly, activated. Now we're not going to pass in the whole request. There's no need to do that. Remember, we have got the email, so we could actually just pass in the request, and then off our request, we can just get the email. Because that's all we want to check, really, to see if this user has been activated. You could even, before that, you could do a check to see if this actual user exists. I mean, that's another thing you can try if you want, by just checking the email and see actually do we have one. If we do, then we can do something with that. Let's try this out. So obviously we need to go into our user service. I'm just copying this for my reference. Pop into here, and we're just gonna obviously write a public function, and just paste this in. Obviously that's not going to be a request email. We'll just call this email, because that's what we're passing in. And not a pound sign, it's a dollar sign. Okay. Now remember, inside our service, this is where we do all our logic, and we're just going to pretty much just check to see against our database to see if they, we could check if they exist, I guess. So check if user exists. We could do that, I guess. That is not what I wanted to do. And this will then go to this, and then we can pretty much just copy this name here and paste it into here. Obviously, we're not going to do that first. We need to jump into our user repository contract. So we're just going to copy that, paste that in, and boom. So basically, we're just doing that check, like I said in the beginning. We're going to check if the user exists against that email address. And then if it does, we can continue with the rest of the flow. Remember, we try and keep away from adding lots of stuff into our controller. We want to do most of our logic inside our service. So we might as well just kill two birds with one stone here. So we're going to go into our user repository contract, and this is just going to check if the user exists. Actually just call this via email, because we might have another one where we can check by ID and stuff. So we can just check if user exists via email. Let's copy this bit of logic here. And we're just going to go into our repository contract, and we're going to create our new, I don't know why they didn't go into our contract. There we go. And let's do public function and paste that in. going to be of type string. You don't have to put that. You can type int if you like. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. I do both different things. It's up to your preference. I'm not really too bothered. So now we decided what we want to do with the repository contracts. So we're just going to do the same here inside our repository. So we're going to jump into our repository. Remember, because we put in our contract, we need to make sure that we do it in here. And we're just going to call the public function, and my IDE sorts it for me. And now I'm just going to do a simple try catch. I can pretty much copy this if I wanted to. And now I can do a similar thing here. So basically, I'm going to do another query to see where, and then we could just say email and is equal to email. This will give me my first result. We can just get rid of the rest of that. And then we can return the user. So this is basically just doing a check to see if this email exists. Make sure it's the same name as what's inside your column. So if you've got a different name here, make sure you put the correct naming convention. Otherwise, it's not going to know what it's looking for. So hopefully, when we run this, it should give us back a user. So we can see on the return, we're going to return back a user. So let's jump back here. And let's just do a die dump. It's always good to check to see if our code's working. So let's just die dump on here. And hopefully when we put in that user information, which was this wazza7@wazza.com, we put that into our postman. I think our password is still password1, and hit send. We should get a die dump from the system. It just takes a little bit longer, sorry, because it's probably my first time using my services. And we'll have a preview, and you can see that we do get a user back. And that's perfect because now we've got the user. We can always check to see if we have this email verified of the user. So instead of saying check the email address, we could actually just check if the user exists with that email address. So there's different ways you can approach it. I just took it by email address. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to make sure that that exists. So because the user exists, we can do a simple if statement here, and we could say, well, if this exists, which it does, we just want to, or we could be a little bit more persistent and say, well, if we do have email verified on there, but we can just put maybe another if into here. So if the user exists, actually, we could just do a little bit extra on here. So we could say if user exists and check if user exists, and off that, we want to check and make sure that we have this email verified at. So I'm just going to copy the name of that. But I do all these videos on the fly. I don't really plan them. They just come into my head whilst we're working on them. Just going to check, okay, do we have a user? If we do, then just make sure we also have this email verified at. And if we have that, let's just die dump and say we got here. And then if we don't, we can always just put a die dump just underneath here if we don't have one. And we'll just say we don't have a verified, like so. Okay. So let's see what happens if we run this. So let's hit send. So we got here, so that's a good thing, because if we have a look inside our code, we know that this if statement is working because we've checked if the user exists. Perfect. And then we're also just checking to see if they have an email verified at. Let's try someone who doesn't. So let's go into our data. We have this wazza6. So let's try him and let's see if we get anything different. So wazza6 and hit send. And then we can see we don't have a verified email. So we know that this is not going to work because they're not verified. And this is a nice way to toggle between what we want to do with that bit of logic. So what we can do now is we can just return true. That's all we have to do there. And then on here, if we don't have anything, we can just, because we know it's simple logic, we can just say return false, like so. So it's just basically like a true and false return back to see if it is activated or not. Let's pop back into here. And what we can do is, because we're checking to see if they're activated, we can do a simple if on top of here. And if they're not activated, so if the user is not activated, so the check activation is false, we're going to return an error response. So we can just copy this one, plug it into there. And instead of unauthorized, we're going to say user needs to activate account, like that. So if we run this code now, we should get that error message. So if we hit send, we get a nice little response back saying data error, it was false, and obviously the message is user needs to activate the account. So this is a nice way that we can toggle between what we want to show to the end user, whether they have an activated account or not. And you'll notice that it didn't continue with the rest of our logic. It stopped here because we got this return in the controller. So basically we just send the data back, and that way we stop before we get anywhere near this. By even using passwords or anything like that, we kind of don't even get near that because we're doing this simple little check before here. This was a nice and easy tutorial, this one, I think, just how we could check against that and give back decent enough results that we can check to see if that was an actual user that has been activated or not. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. If you really liked it, make sure you hit that share button. And if you really liked it, make sure you share this with your friends. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.